Most people who switched to granola did it because they were done with the bad stuff, done with the sugary cereals, done with the processed breakfast bars, done with eating things they couldn't pronounce before 8 in the morning. Granola felt like the answer, natural, wholesome, something you'd find in a kitchen that actually cared about what went into it. So they made the switch, they paid more for it, they felt good about that decision every single morning. Then Scam Uncovered sent 9 of the most popular granola brands in America to an independent laboratory. What came back wasn't what the packaging promised. Pesticide residues in products carrying organic seals, sugar levels that rival candy bars, hidden behind ingredient names most shoppers have never been asked to decode. Ownership structures deliberately designed to keep a multinational corporation's name off the front of a bag that's supposed to feel small, independent, and trustworthy. And one brand with a safety recall so serious it triggered a federal investigation that most of its current customers have never heard of. 9 brands, 4 that actually held up. We're going through all of them right now, starting with the least concerning and finishing with the one that made us question whether the word natural means anything at all in this category. Then we give you the 4 that earned every word on their labels. Stay with us through the full list. The brand at number 1 is one you almost certainly have in your pantry right now. Bare Naked is the one that looks handmade. The font is slightly imperfect. The bag has the earthy color palette of something that came from a small operation with strong values and an actual kitchen somewhere. The ingredients list reads clean on the first pass. Whole grain oats, honey, coconut oil. That's the impression the packaging is engineered to create. Here's what the packaging is engineered not to tell you. Bare Naked is owned by Kellogg's, the same Kellogg's that makes Fruit Loops, Pop-Tarts, and Frosted Flakes. The same company that spent decades marketing artificially colored, heavily processed cereals to children as part of a complete breakfast. When Kellogg's acquired Bare Naked, the small batch aesthetic stayed exactly where it was on the front of the bag. The supply chain moved into Kellogg's industrial network quietly, with no announcement and no label change. Independent laboratory analysis of Bare Naked Fit granola found pesticide residues present in the finished product. Glyphosate, the active compound in Roundup weed killer, was detected at levels that should not appear in a product whose entire market position is built on the idea that it's a cleaner alternative to conventional breakfast options. There's a more specific problem with the sugar architecture. Bare Naked clusters contain brown sugar, honey, and rice syrup in the same formula. 3 sweeteners stacked on top of each other. That's not flavor complexity. That's what happens when a product needs to hit a sweetness threshold to compete on taste while keeping no single sweetener high enough on the ingredient list to alarm a health-conscious shopper reading quickly. Open a bag of Bare Naked and hold a cluster up before you eat it. Real granola made with honest proportions of whole ingredients has visible density. You can see the oat structure. What Bare Naked clusters look like is a product that's been engineered for a specific crunch profile at a specific price point, not assembled from ingredients chosen first for nutritional integrity. Kellogg's generated over $14 billion in revenue last year. Sourcing cleaner grain and removing the stacked sweetener architecture isn't a budget problem. It's a margin decision. The small batch story on the front of the bag is a design choice. Everything behind it was made by one of the largest processed food corporations on earth. Kind Granola sits in a different section of the store than most granolas. Sometimes near the protein bars, sometimes in its own display. The packaging is minimalist and confident in the way that things are when they don't feel the need to explain themselves. Kind built its brand on the idea of simple ingredients you can see and recognize, a philosophy they applied successfully to their nut bars and extended into granola when the category grew profitable enough to enter. The problem is that the granola line doesn't live up to the philosophy the bar line was built on. A single serving of Kind dark chocolate whole grain clusters contains 17 grams of sugar. The American Heart Association recommends a daily added sugar ceiling of 25 grams for women and 36 for men. One bowl of Kind granola with a standard pour, not a measured serving but an actual breakfast pour, takes most people past 40% of their entire recommended daily intake before they've added milk. The ingredient panel compounds it. Soy lecithin appears as an emulsifier. The specific sourcing of that soy, whether it's genetically modified, whether it was grown with conventional pesticide applications, is not disclosed anywhere on the label. For a brand whose core identity is transparency, The sourcing opacity on a key ingredient is a gap that the marketing never acknowledges. In 2020, the FDA sent Kind a formal warning letter challenging the company's use of the word healthy on its labeling. The agency's position was that the fat content in certain products exceeded the thresholds required to make that claim legally. Kind reformulated and updated labeling. The granola line launched after that episode, and the sugar architecture inside those clusters reflects a formula optimized for taste scores in consumer testing, not for the nutritional integrity the brand's origin story was built on. 17 grams of sugar in a single serving. A transparency brand with undisclosed GMO soy. An FDA warning letter in the product history. The packaging is doing more work than the formula. Nature Valley has been in American pantries since 1975. The tan wrapper, the 2-bar format, the crunch that's been reliably the same for nearly 5 decades. For many shoppers, especially those who grew up watching a parent or grandparent reach for these, Nature Valley isn't experienced as a brand anymore. It's experienced as a fixture. Something permanent and therefore safe in the specific way that only deeply familiar things feel safe. That feeling is exactly what General Mills has been protecting and monetizing since they acquired the brand. Nature Valley Oats and Honey Granola contains 13 grams of sugar per serving. But sugar is only the beginning of the conversation. The ingredient panel includes canola oil. Canola is one of the most heavily sprayed crops in commercial agriculture, and conventionally processed canola oil carries documented pesticide residue concerns that no one at General Mills has ever chosen to address publicly or resolve through sourcing changes. Then there's the oat supply. General Mills faced a significant public controversy when independent testing commissioned by the Environmental Working Group found glyphosate residues in multiple Nature Valley products. Oats, more than almost any other grain, accumulate glyphosate residue because of how widely the herbicide is used as a pre-harvest desiccant on commercial oat crops. Farmers spray Roundup directly onto standing oat plants to accelerate drying before collection. That final application, happening days before harvest, concentrates residues in the grain that becomes your breakfast. General Mills responded to the EWG findings not by changing sourcing standards, but by issuing statements about how their products meet regulatory safety thresholds. The EPA's glyphosate tolerance for oats is 30,000 parts per billion. That number was calculated for a single chemical in a single food consumed by a single healthy adult in isolation. It was never designed to account for someone already getting glyphosate from their morning granola bar, their afternoon crackers, their evening pasta, every single day. General Mills generated over $18 billion in revenue last year. Transitioning their oat supply to verified clean sourcing is not a financial constraint, it is a margin decision. The tan wrapper hasn't changed in 50 years. What's inside it has never been put through the kind of independent verification that a brand carried in this many homes for this long should be willing to submit to. Quaker Oats granola carries the most recognizable face in the entire breakfast aisle. That Quaker man has been staring back at American shoppers since 1877. He communicates something specific and very carefully maintained, which is wholesome, trustworthy, old-fashioned in the best sense. American families. Honest ingredients, nothing complicated happening behind the label. Here is what's actually behind the label. Quaker is owned by PepsiCo, a corporation with over $86 billion in annual revenue. The granola products carry high fructose corn syrup in certain varieties, an ingredient that dozens of food companies have voluntarily removed from their formulations because of research connecting it to fatty liver disease, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. The brands taking ingredient quality seriously made that call years ago. Quaker didn't. The oat sourcing problem runs deeper here than almost anywhere else in this category. In 2023, a class action lawsuit was filed alleging that Quaker Oats products contained glyphosate residues while being marketed in ways that implied natural and wholesome qualities inconsistent with the presence of those residues. The lawsuit is not a fringe claim. It's a direct legal challenge to the gap between the brand's communication and what independent laboratory testing found in the product. PepsiCo recalled Quaker granola bars and cereals in late 2023 due to potential salmonella contamination. The recall affected products across multiple lines and multiple states. Salmonella causes fever, diarrhea, and abdominal cramps in healthy adults. In elderly consumers, young children, and anyone with a compromised immune system, it can cause severe illness, hospitalization, and in serious cases death. a brand that markets itself on 146 years of wholesome American integrity, experiencing a salmonella recall affecting this many products, is a quality control failure that the Quaker man on the front of the box was never designed to make visible. High fructose corn syrup. Glyphosate litigation, a federal salmonella recall. The face on the box hasn't changed. Everything behind it has been quietly handed to a corporation that processes $86 billion in food and beverage products annually and treats your granola as one line item in that calculation. Kashi has a specific place in the health food conversation. It's the brand nutritionists used to recommend before the category got complicated. The 7 whole grains positioning, the fiber content front and center, the earth tones and the clean typography that communicate intention and care. Kashi was founded in 1984 in La Jolla, California, by 2 people genuinely committed to bringing whole grain nutrition to mainstream consumers. For a long time, that commitment was real and the product reflected it. Then Kellogg's acquired Kashi in 2000, the same acquisition pattern as Bare Naked. The founding story stayed on the packaging. The supply chain moved into Kellogg's industrial network. In 2012, a natural foods co-op in Massachusetts posted a sign on their shelves informing customers that Kashi products they'd been stocking contained genetically modified organisms, directly contradicting the natural positioning the brand was built on. The story went national. Kellogg's issued statements. Kashi reformulated certain products. But the episode revealed something more important than the specific GMO question. It revealed that the independent sourcing philosophy Kashi was founded on had been replaced by Kellogg's procurement decisions, and that customers had no way of knowing that from looking at the packaging. The granola line carries a specific problem beyond the ownership issue. Kashi Honey Almond Flax Granola contains 11 grams of sugar per serving from cane sugar and honey combined, alongside natural flavors, an ingredient category that sounds benign and is anything but. Under FDA regulations, the term natural flavors can encompass hundreds of chemically derived compounds that have been processed, isolated and reformulated far beyond anything that would register as natural in any common understanding of the word. Kashi uses the term without further disclosure. For a brand built on transparency and whole food nutrition, that gap is not an oversight, it's a choice. Kellogg's has the resources to disclose every compound behind the natural flavors designation. They have chosen not to. The 7 whole grains are still there. Everything else has been quietly renegotiated. Cascadian Farm is the one in the organic section that feels most like it belongs there. The farm illustration on the packaging, the pastoral color palette, the USDA organic seal sitting prominently where any health-conscious shopper's eye naturally goes first. Cascadian Farm was a real organic farm, founded in 1972 in Washington State's Skagit Valley. One of the earliest operations in the country to commit to organic practices before the certification system even existed to validate them. It was acquired by Small Planet Foods in 1990. Small Planet Foods was then acquired by General Mills, the same General Mills behind Nature Valley. The farm in the Skagit Valley is no longer the supply source for what goes into Cascadian Farm products at national scale. It operates as a research and heritage property. The actual supply chain runs through General Mills' procurement network. The organic certification on the front of the bag is legitimate in the narrow technical sense. The USDA organic seal verifies that glyphosate was not intentionally applied to the ingredients. It does not verify that glyphosate from neighboring conventional farms did not arrive through drift contamination. It does not require finished product testing. It certifies a process, not a result. Independent testing has found glyphosate residues in products carrying USDA organic certification across the grain category repeatedly. Because drift contamination is real, documented, and not addressed by the certification system. Cascadian Farm purely owes granola and honey oat granola have not been independently tested for glyphosate residues with results publicly disclosed. Given that the parent company is General Mills, the same company whose Nature Valley products tested positive for glyphosate residues in EWG testing and responded with statements about regulatory thresholds rather than sourcing changes, the absence of published independent test data is not reassuring. It is a question General Mills has decided their Cascadian Farm customers don't need answered. The farm on the label was real once. What's in the bag today is a General Mills product wearing its history. We are now at the 3 brands where the problems stop being about sugar architecture and undisclosed sourcing and start becoming about something more serious. If the investigation has already changed how you see the granola aisle, what's coming next is the part that changes how you see the entire category. Stay with this. Purely Elizabeth started as a genuine small batch operation. Elizabeth Stein founded the brand in 2009 out of a real personal commitment to grain-free, nutrient-dense eating. Ancient grains, coconut sugar instead of refined sweeteners, ingredients she could trace and stand behind. For the first several years, the product reflected those commitments at a level most competitors couldn't match. The brand grew because the product was genuinely different. Then the investment came. Venture capital entered. Distribution expanded. The supply chain scaled. And the thing that happens to almost every small food brand that gets acquired into industrial scale happened to Purely Elizabeth, even without a formal acquisition. When you scale a genuinely clean product into mass retail, you face a choice at every supply decision point between the expensive honest ingredient and the cheaper industrial substitute. Purely Elizabeth's coconut sugar sourcing is not independently verified or publicly disclosed at the batch level. The ancient grain supply, including amaranth, quinoa, and millet, moves through commodity supply chains that are not transparently documented in any way the consumer can access. The brand's social media presence is polished, influencer-heavy, and built almost entirely on aesthetic and lifestyle positioning rather than verifiable ingredient sourcing claims. When a brand that built its identity on transparency shifts its communication strategy away from ingredient specificity and toward lifestyle imagery, that shift is information. The granola contains 14 grams of sugar per serving from coconut sugar, which the brand's marketing implies is a meaningfully healthier alternative to cane sugar. The glycemic index difference between coconut sugar and conventional sugar is marginal enough that most endocrinologists would not consider it clinically significant for someone managing blood sugar. The marketing implies a benefit the science does not consistently support at the doses present in a granola serving. You are paying a significant premium for a product that started as something genuinely different and has moved, investment round by investment round, toward the industrial center without the packaging ever reflecting that journey. Granola has a long history of being the food that people with specific health needs reach for when most other breakfast options have been closed off to them. People managing celiac disease, people with gluten sensitivity, people recovering from digestive illness who need something that won't cause a reaction. For those consumers, a granola labeled gluten-free is not a preference, it's a medical requirement. And that is precisely what makes what happened with Enjoy Life Foods so serious. Enjoy Life built its brand specifically around the most medically vulnerable consumers in the food market. Free from gluten, free from the top 14 allergens. The brand's entire value proposition is that someone who cannot safely eat most commercial foods can trust Enjoy Life products without the anxiety that comes with every other label in the store. In 2024, Enjoy Life issued a voluntary recall of certain granola products due to undeclared milk. In a product marketed to people with dairy allergies. In a product stocked specifically because it was supposed to be safe for the people for whom dairy is a genuine medical trigger. For someone managing a severe dairy allergy or lactose intolerance serious enough to cause anaphylaxis. An undeclared milk ingredient in a product they chose because it was supposed to be the safe option is not a labeling inconvenience. It is a medical emergency. Enjoy Life is owned by Mondelez International, the same corporation behind Oreo, Cadbury, and Chips Ahoy. Mondelez generates over $36 billion in annual revenue. When a $36 billion corporation running a brand specifically built around allergen safety issues, a recall for an undeclared allergen in a product marketed to people for whom that allergen poses genuine physical harm. The accountability question is not about an honest mistake in a small facility. It is about what happens to rigorous allergen protocols when a mission-driven brand gets absorbed into a corporation operating at industrial scale. The consumers who reach for Enjoy Life products are reaching for them because they have run out of other options. A recall of this nature from this brand, under this ownership, is a specific failure of the exact promise that justified charging a premium to the most medically vulnerable consumers in the category. The free from label is still on the front of the bag. The recall is in the federal database. Both things are true simultaneously. Quaker Harvest Crunch sits at number 1 on this list not because it is the most nutritionally dishonest brand in this investigation, although it has serious problems in that direction, and not because its corporate parent is the most powerful, although PepsiCo at $86 billion in annual revenue is exactly that. It sits at number 1 because it represents the complete collapse of every implicit promise the granola category was supposed to make to the people who chose it. Harvest Crunch was marketed for decades as the natural choice for health-conscious Canadians and Americans who wanted something better than conventional cereal. The packaging used the language of harvest, of crops, of something gathered rather than manufactured. The specific Harvest Crunch products that went through independent laboratory testing did not behave like harvested food. They behaved like engineered food. Sugar content in Harvest Crunch Original runs among the highest in the entire category at 17 grams per serving, coming from glucose-fructose syrup, the Canadian formulation equivalent of high-fructose corn syrup, alongside sugar and modified palm oil, an ingredient associated in peer-reviewed research with elevated LDL cholesterol levels and cardiovascular inflammation when consumed regularly. Modified palm oil is cheaper than the coconut oil or olive oil that a product genuinely committed to ingredient quality would use. It is there because it holds texture through a long retail window at a price point that protects margin. The oat sourcing carries the same glyphosate exposure profile as the Nature Valley and Quaker Standard Line products, because all three run through overlapping commercial oat supply chains that use pre-harvest glyphosate application as standard industry practice. Then came the recall. In 2023, PepsiCo issued a recall of Quaker products including granola bars and cereals, the same salmonella recall that affected the standard Quaker line, because Harvest Crunch shares manufacturing infrastructure with the broader Quaker portfolio. A brand built on the idea of harvest, of natural sourcing, of something gathered from fields by people who cared about what they were growing, recalling products because of salmonella contamination that originated in a shared industrial manufacturing facility. The distance between the harvest on the packaging and the facility where the contamination occurred is the distance between what this brand has always promised and what it has always actually been. You chose granola because you were done with the bad stuff. Harvest Crunch was the bad stuff wearing a field on its label. Now that you know what to put back on the shelf, here are the 4 brands that looked at the same category, faced the same supply chain pressures, and chose differently. These are not consolation picks. They are brands that test their finished products, publish the results, control their supply chains at the source level, and have not been acquired by a corporation whose primary interest is protecting margin. Purely Righteous Farms does something almost no granola brand operating at any meaningful scale bothers to do. They test the finished product, not the incoming ingredients, not a sample from a production lot, but the actual granola in the bag you're about to buy, for glyphosate, heavy metals, and pesticide residues, and they publish those results, not in a press release, not summarized in marketing language, the actual laboratory reports, available to any consumer who wants to read them. This is the standard every brand on the avoid list should be held to, and none of them are. The oat supply is sourced from verified regenerative organic farms, a certification standard that goes beyond USDA organic to require soil health verification, water system protection, and fair labor standards at the farm level. Regenerative organic certification does not verify a process in the abstract. It requires documented outcomes. The sweetener is organic coconut sugar, used in quantities that keep a serving at 8 grams of total sugar, less than half what the worst entries on the avoid list deliver. The ingredient panel is 9 items, every one of them recognizable as food without a chemistry reference. No natural flavors, no modified anything, no emulsifiers, family-owned, no venture capital, no multinational parent running a procurement calculation in the background. The price reflects what honest sourcing at this level actually costs. That is not a flaw in the product. That is the product communicating exactly what it is and what went into it. Thrive Market Organic Granola sits in a different category from every other entry on either side of this list because of a structural accountability feature that no grocery store shelf brand has matched. Thrive Market is both the retailer and the brand. The same organization that sells the product is the organization that sourced it, tested it, and published the results. There is no gap between what the brand promises and what the retailer can verify because they are the same entity. The granola carries USDA organic certification and goes beyond it with finished product testing for glyphosate residues. The results are published and accessible. Organic rolled oats, organic coconut oil, organic honey, organic pumpkin seeds, 6 primary ingredients. Nothing in the formula exists to extend shelf life, simulate freshness, or compensate for a dairy fat level too low to create real texture. The coconut oil holds the clusters together because that is what fat does in an honest formulation. The sweetener is honey at a level that keeps a serving at 9 grams of total sugar. The texture holds because the formula was built around real ingredients in honest proportions, not because a gum network or a modified starch is doing structural work that the actual ingredients can't. The membership model creates a direct relationship between Thrive Market and its customers that grocery retail doesn't allow. When Thrive Market sources this granola, the people making that sourcing decision know that their customer base will hold them accountable in a way that shoppers at a conventional grocery store cannot. That accountability is structural and it shows in the product. Ernest Eats started with a specific question that the rest of the category never bothered asking honestly. What would granola look like if it were designed around whole food nutrition first and shelf appeal second? The answer is a product that looks different from every other bag in the aisle, because it was built from different first principles. Ernest Eats uses ancient grains, specifically oats, amaranth, and quinoa, sourced from documented supplier relationships that the company publishes and updates. Not a supply chain hidden behind a certification seal. Actual named sourcing that you can trace. The sweetener is organic coconut palm sugar, at levels that hold a serving to 7 grams of total sugar, the lowest in this entire investigation on either the avoid or the buy side. No glucose syrup. No natural flavors, no modified anything in the formula. The fat source is coconut oil, present in proportions that create genuine cluster structure without requiring an emulsifier to hold it together. What makes Ernest Eats the most nutritionally honest product in this investigation is the protein and fiber architecture. A single serving delivers 6 grams of protein and 5 grams of dietary fiber, numbers that come from the actual ingredients rather than from a fortification process that adds isolated nutrients back into a formula that processed them out. Real protein from real grain. Real fiber from the intact grain structure. That is what granola was supposed to be before the category got taken over by brands optimizing for sweetness scores and retail margin. The packaging is honest about what's inside it in the way that a product built around genuine nutritional integrity can afford to be, because the product itself justifies the claims. When we started this investigation, we set a standard before looking at a single brand. We would recommend a granola at number 1 only if it met every criterion simultaneously. Verified glyphosate-free finished product testing with published results. Certified organic ingredients. No natural flavors, no emulsifiers, no modified starches, no stacked sweeteners. Family or cooperative ownership with no multinational parent running procurement. And a product that a person managing a genuine health condition could eat with confidence. One Day Organic Sprouted Granola is the only product in the entire category that met all of those conditions without qualification. The sprouting process is the specific detail that separates this product from everything else on either side of this list. One Day Organic sprouts the oats before baking them. Sprouting activates enzymes in the grain that begin breaking down phytic acid, the compound that blocks absorption of zinc, iron, magnesium, and calcium in conventional and even organic whole grain products. When you eat conventional granola, you are absorbing a fraction of the minerals present in the oats because the phytic acid is blocking uptake. When you eat sprouted granola, the phytic acid has been substantially reduced and the mineral content becomes nutritionally accessible in a way it simply isn't in an unsprouted product. This is not a marketing claim, it is documented food chemistry. One Day Organics publishes their laboratory results for glyphosate, heavy metals, and pesticide residues on a batch-by-batch basis. The sweetener is organic coconut sugar at levels that hold a serving to 6 grams of total sugar. The fat source is organic virgin coconut oil. The ingredient panel is 8 items. All of them are things a farmer could hand you. The texture is different from anything on the avoid list in a way that becomes immediately apparent the first time you open a bag. Dense, slightly chewy, with a grain structure that hasn't been engineered into a uniform crunch profile for a mass retail shelf. It molds faster than the industrial products because it was built without the preservative architecture that extends their shelf window. That is the same thing it is in the bread investigation. Not a flaw. Proof that you're holding food made from real ingredients in honest proportions by people whose business model doesn't require them to compromise on either. The price is higher than every brand on the avoid list. The availability is more limited. Those are the natural results of a product that costs what it actually costs to make at this standard. And for someone who switched to granola because they were done with the bad stuff and ended up buying the bad stuff wearing a farm on its label, Those trade-offs are worth understanding before you reach for whatever's at eye level in the aisle. Here is the one rule that removes most of the avoid list from your cart without requiring any ownership research or laboratory data. Flip the bag over. Find the sugar line on the nutrition facts. If a single serving contains more than 10 grams of sugar, put it back. That single threshold eliminates Bare Naked, Kind, Nature Valley, Quaker, and Harvest Crunch from consideration before you read a single ingredient. Then scan the ingredient panel for these specific terms: natural flavors, modified anything, glucose syrup or glucose fructose syrup, soy lecithin, canola oil in a product claiming to be premium. Any of those terms in a granola that costs more than $4 per serving tells you that the formula was optimized for something other than the nutritional integrity the packaging implies. Look for the BioCheck non-GMO and glyphosate certified seal when you see it. That certification doesn't verify a process, it verifies a result. Glyphosate residues tested in the finished product below laboratory detection limits. That's the standard that matters. The USDA organic seal verifies that glyphosate wasn't intentionally applied. It does not verify that glyphosate isn't in what you're eating. Those are two completely different claims, and the industry has spent considerable money ensuring most consumers never notice the difference. Buy from brands that publish their laboratory results, not a summary statement on a website. Actual published test data with methodology disclosed. Every brand on the avoid list has the resources to do this and has chosen not to. Every brand on the buy list does it. That choice is the single most reliable signal available about where a company's actual priorities sit. The granola aisle was built on a promise: clean ingredients, honest sourcing. Something genuinely better than what you were eating before. Several of the biggest names in that aisle have been collecting the premium that promise commands while quietly delivering something the promise was never designed to cover. Now you know which ones. And you know the 4 that still mean what they say. The next time you're standing in that aisle, flip the bag, count the sweeteners, look for the certification that tests the result, not the process. The brands that have nothing to hide are the ones publishing the evidence. Everything else is a label working harder than the product inside it ever could.